I forgot the traditional sign in, and it goes salutations. That was just like Garrett, wasn't it? It was exactly like his. Y'all can't even tell the difference. I know it. I even got the cap and everything. It's like a clone. Well, hey, thanks for joining in. We have another Worldbuilding Wednesday tonight coming to you. Thanks for joining in as we go in and we do a little bit of building. Hey, today's Wednesday, and I think that's a perfect day for building up stuff. Let's get into some stuff. Let's get into some things. So last week, we shifted gears from Storyelus, which me and Garrett had been working on for a bit, trying to get a little bit more depth, build out this world as they are working the campaign, which started last week, and that first episode was pretty funny. The wolf had me laughing. That voice, that wacky voice that Garrett was doing, was making me laugh for sure. Until they, well, you'll have to watch the stream. You'll have to watch episode 1 for that campaign to know what happened beyond that. But it's a pretty good start. Can't wait for y'all to see more of what's going on in there. But here at 225, we are about bringing games, entertainment, supplements, all sorts of good stuff for y'all, and we're working on some new adventures. And one we've run as a one-shot before with our D&D table, Quadrivium. This is something I kind of brought in here. I'm trying to bring something for y'all, and it went over pretty well. We had some good times, lots of critiques, things to build on from there. And one of the first times I was DMing something more than just kind of a silly one-off. Our DM was out for the day or something like that, but it was pretty entertaining, and it was interesting to say the least. But we had a lot of fun, and we want to expand that and maybe one day bring that for y'all's entertainment as well. Right now we're building out the world, building it, giving it a little bit more depth, make it feel a little bit better there in the setting, and that's what we're working on. Last week we worked on the religion just a little bit, kind of touched in on that. So the Church of Pollux and Castor and Pollux, we went through that dynamic there, a little bit how that they have a spectrum of things. It's not just we're about love, or we're about conquest or gold, or just one thing. It's a spectrum of things. There's a extreme on both sides, so to say, and everybody's got a different perspective of what's going down there, and that's one of the things that makes it interesting to me, and hopefully make it interesting to the players. And we'll keep exploring that, but not quite today. We also started working on the priest, Lester. He is a grasshopper, full humanoid grasshopper. Gave him a little bit of racial characteristics, so I'll have to come back and keep working on him a little bit more. Still need a name for that race, that little homebrew. So if anybody has ideas or suggestions for a race name for the grasshopper, let me know. I'm gonna put that in the chat too. For a grasshopper race. People. I'm gonna put creature. There we go. Yeah. Put out some suggestions. Maybe we'll take up your ideas. But yeah. Anyway, this week, today, I wanted to work a little bit on the actual world itself. I want to work on the geography. Now, geography, I know some folks might be rolling their eyes, like, maps and stuff are boring. Some people are like, oh, I love maps. I love worlds and stuff and grit and all that kind of things. Um, all the land masses and things like that. And that's amazing, whether you're on one side of it or not. But what we're going to come at this perspective with is that the land, the geography, the world needs to have significance. Not just well, I'm going to put a mountain here because mountains are cool. I mean, mountains are cool, don't get me wrong, but we need a purpose. There needs to be something behind it. So think of I'm going to use Lord of the Rings as a little example here. Think of the Lonely Mountain. The whole reason, hopefully, hashtag no spoilers for The Hobbit, but the Lonely Mountain is a huge piece for the story because that is where the dragon is, and where they have to find their way in and sneak through things. And obviously, how are you going to hide a giant dragon other than a mountain? So that's a great way to put in that little tie-in with the land. Wouldn't have made as much sense if it was just a wide open plain. I mean, everybody would see the dragon and all this stuff. That would not be as interactive or engaging. Also, wouldn't have had a chance for Bilbo to get the ring from Gollum, so there's that as well. Or even when in the Fellowship, when they're trying to cross over the mountains, and they're finding it very difficult to go over the top, and the mountain was too difficult to cross on top, so they had to go down below it through the mines of Moria. And of course that led to big problems with the Balrog. But the environment, the geography played a major role for the characters, for the players. And that's what we want the world to be. We don't want it to be just, oh, this would be cool. What if we did a swamp? Swamps are cool. No, we want some purpose behind these points. And some of it, I might hide a little bit. Got to keep a little mystique in case for when we do release a little quadrivium adventure or 2 or 3. And I'd like for you to have no spoilers coming into that, but we might touch a little bit on some flavors and things. Anyway, let's get started a little bit. Gonna switch over to the other thing. There it is. Good old quadrivium geography. So let's talk about the world for a second. So the setting itself, and we're not going to get into a map builder. I know there's some great ones out there. There's all sorts of great materials online for building maps and things like that. I'm not going to get into that on the stream because, one, I'm not super good at using them, and I don't want to burn up your time or the stream time saying, hey, how do you do this? What's that? Instead, I just want ideas to flow and go through, write a vision with a theater of the mind where D&D was born. And that's what we're going to use for right now. The map itself will come later. But yeah, so that's what we're doing right now. So the first thing to know about the area around Quadrivium, so we're going for a Western styled flavor. So think about, the good old West. And when I'm talking about West, I mean like a Western movie, good old cowboy. We're going to meet at high noon, have a shootout, tumbleweed blows across the road kind of thing. So there's going to be mixtures of things. So, Wild West flavoring, and just put in some ideas, tumbleweeds. I'm just mind dumping right here. Tumbleweeds, kind of dusty kind of feel. Also rocky. Like with canyons and sort of things like that. Think like a desert, but when you come across like maybe a mesa or plateau or something like that, where we're looking at big rocks, not a mountain, but that feel when and there there's ridges and rises and things like that to give it a little depth variation. We're not just in a flat desert. We're in the West. And some reasons why I'm picking this flavoring is because I want Quadrivium to feel gritty, I want it to feel gritty. I want them to feel like there's dust coming in between their teeth for the players. I want that feel to come in there because there's going to be some hard choices. There's going to be some difficult things, and one of the themes for this adventure is going to be about choice, going one way or the other. You got to pick a side, kind of thing. Shout out to Tombstone right there, or Step Aside. Love that movie, but I want it to feel gritty. I want it to have that kind of rough edges to it. And to me, that Western feel gives it that flavor by itself with just the setting. I don't feel like we would get that same type of feel with a forest or probably not a mountain. Like with a mountain, I think more like hardened. Like we have rough winters, very hardy kind of thing. Maybe more difficult to get food because you don't have a lot of farmland, but you have a lot of that in a Western field too because you don't have a lot of water. So water is very difficult to come by. So these are folks who are survivors, getting into it, and just other types of terrains that I don't feel like would work. Maybe like a forest or a plain. And I feel like a plain is too bland in my mind, but it's because I grew up in a plain out in good old West Texas. Love it, but I personally don't want to make a fantasy setup in something that's exactly like what I grew up in, just flat as a table, grass and weeds everywhere, no change in depth or formation, because that's not very fun. But yeah, so maybe even a swamp. I think when you're building your world, maybe a swamp could achieve a lot of the same type of feel, because you do have to be tough, and it is a little bit gritty as well in a swamp. Nothing's pretty there, and you've got a lot of predators, things of that nature coming around. So that could be its own problem. And another reason why I want to use the West in this setup is I want to use guns. I want to use firearms in D&D. I know some folks don't like it. They want the purity of good old swords and axes and things like that, and I love that part of D&D too. But I don't have a lot of adventures where you get to use firearms and things of that nature, and have a little bit of a shootout, and make it a little interesting for your more martial characters. Maybe they've got to figure out ways to use cover. Cover becomes very important when you're having to use firearms, because getting shot hurts a lot. Like I think like a 6-shooter, it's like a 2d8, something like that. You can have a rifle that's like a 2d10. Guns hurt. Guns are tough. And so we can give it a lot of good flavor right there with having that in. And man, who out there just loved a good old cowboy western movie growing up? I sure did. I love cowboy movies. John Wayne, big fan of John Wayne. I know it's kind of basic, but there, Road to El Dorado, one of my favorites out there. War Wagon, also great. Plenty of others. so many good ones, and but we don't want to get off on that tangent. We'll talk about movies all day long. Um, but there's a certain toughness that comes with these sort of things too. Um, anyway, let's get back into the geography. So we're wanting it to feel rough. We want it to feel gritty. So there's also a lack of water sources. That's a very common theme out in the West, and that's one of the things that helps make it feel a little grittier, a little tougher. And fighting for water sources was a big deal in Western, historically speaking, settings, because you needed water sources for cattle, for driving cattle and things like that. And cattle takes up a lot of water, lots and lots of water. Sometimes there had been issues where they would have so much cattle coming through a certain part that they would dry up, natural rivers and things of that nature, or small water sources, and it would make it even more difficult. So having a lot of conservation of water was very important, and maybe there's room for that in this world. I almost put conversation. Conservation, not conversation, conservation of water is important. And also, there is a river that runs straight through town, and I kind of picture this like almost being like the Nile of Egypt, and we're just putting that over here. You get too far away from the river, and you're not going to have a good time. Not going to have a good time at all. And one of the adventures that I have in mind is going to be a situation where we have to go out far from the river, and water becomes a survival factor in there, and that could be an interesting aspect to an adventure. So I've got multiple ideas coming out of this world right here. So we'll just have to keep expanding, keep thinking about it. If there's any things that you like seeing out there in a Western world, or ideas that you like, let me know in the comments. We'll get right in it for sure. Let's keep going. So, river runs through the middle of town, and this river is called Vivarium. And I can't exactly reveal why it's called that. One of the reasons it is because it is related a little bit to some plot reasons, but also because I don't remember exactly where I got it from. Full transparency, call me out, it's okay. So the river is called Vivarium, and this is important too because the river going straight through the middle of town helps divide the town into two parts. One side on this side of the river, one on this side of the river, and that's crucial because if water is a very lacking resource, folks are going to want to be as close to the river as possible. So you're not going to build your town where it's just on one side of the river and everybody just builds out that way, or even like in a semicircle away from the river. No, the smarter thing to do would be to build on both sides of the river. That way you have more access, more waterfront availability, and that's what happens. Divides the town into two parts to allow for more waterfront access. Besides, who doesn't want to build their house on the waterfront? I mean, anywhere. That's why you have lake houses and beach properties and things like that, because for some reason we're just drawn to the water. and nothing like having that, water view from your hotel room, your bedroom, your house, wherever. So that's kind of nice too. Well, let's keep going. So the river comes through, and I don't want to make it super massive like the Mississippi, um, but we need it to be large enough to where it's not going to dry up, kind of thing. Um, so it's probably, let's make it about, let's say about 80 feet across. 80 feet across. One reason for that number too is that it's difficult for any of the characters under normal circumstances to just cross over the river um, without having some difficulty. So we don't want to make it too easy on them, right? Although if someone's playing an Aarakocra, they're just going to be like, whatever. Or a water genasi, I guess it wouldn't be a problem for. But, you gotta make them work for it, right? Can't just let it be easy. A 10-foot river. I run and jump across. And it needs to be big, but not too big. Okay, so it's 80 feet across. There are bridges, of course, to connect both sides. And when I think of these bridges, I mean like big stonework bridges, because they want to build something that lasts and that can make it over these 80 feet. So massive structures. A few years ago, before all the craziness in the world of 2020, my wife and I, we went to Venice, and in Italy, Venice, Italy, and they have some of these amazing stone bridges. You take these steps up, and it's huge. These bridges are massive. You can fit hundreds of people on these things probably. They just go up and cross over, and you can go back down on the other side. Some of them even had like little shops, like street vendors and things like that on the bridge. So that's just telling you like how massive these things were, and that's what I have in mind right here for these bridges, because I just love that aesthetic. So we're stealing things all over the place. We're stealing the Nile, we're stealing Venice bridges, we're stealing the Old West. We're gonna have a very diverse world, and it's gonna be okay, because it's a fantasy, and you should do that. You should have diversity in your fantasy world. All right. One of the other things about the quadrivium is it's divided into 4 parts. That's why it's a quad, 4. 4 for quad. We already have it divided in half by the river, so the other half that we're going to divide it into is going to be crossways from the river, and we're going to make essentially an intersection, like a plus sign or a cross, that sort of thing. And this crossways intersection is going to be from a cliff. So imagine you have the top side and then just a 200-foot drop. Yeah, let's do that. And I want it to be like almost like a straight cliff wall where the town actually is, and once you get away from the town, it kind of branches out and does random nature type patterns. But where the town is, it's fairly straight, because I want the aesthetic of it being almost exactly like an intersection, almost like 90 degree angles at each point. And we can drop a little spoiler about that. Um, so if you were to Google, you know what? Let's Google for a second, because this isn't so much a spoiler because you could actually Google this yourself. We're gonna go English to Latin. Because everything is better in Latin. And if I were to put in here Crossroads, Quadrivium is the name that pops up. And I'm not going to say anything about why I chose the word crossroads. You can figure that out on your own. But that is exactly what this town is all about. It is a crossroads. And that kind of plays into the whole idea of choices. Crossroads represents making a choice. A fork in the road could also do that, but I felt like a fork in the road was too on the nose. And I don't know, the if you put fork in there, I just didn't feel like a town of Furka was gonna do the what I needed. Or maybe fork in the road. How's that? Yeah, that's not any better at all. Yeah, I'm sticking with crossroads. Um, and I have to use Latin because Latin's so much better than everything, right? That's what all the experts say. That's what we do. We rip off Latin for everything. That's definitely not a shot fired at anyone. Okay, so we're going with this crossroads representing choices, which will play out a big time in the plot points going for the adventure that the main adventure that I have in mind. At least the one that I've currently have ran. So we have this cliff wall. We have river. We have two pieces on the top, and this is the upper side, and there are clearly two halves of the upper side. We'll get into what those are, but these are different sections of the city, the different districts, if you will. And then down at the base of the cliff, we're gonna have two lower sides, which will also have two districts. And I love how I just wrote lower side. That's super great. I'll fix that later. And this also represents the upper class and the lower class, because this is going to be important as well. And you may be picking up on some themes right here, that there are a lot of extremes in Quadrivium. In the religion, we have a spectrum. Here in the socioeconomic status, a very big extreme, and we'll touch on this another time. But the economic status and the upper side and the lower side, very far apart. There is no middle class. You're either a lower or you're an upper, and having that cliff wall clearly separate these people is a big deal. And we'll talk about later how access and things of that nature is even a selective thing, and how the cliff just continues to push down the lower side. So this goes back into the whole idea that your geography needs to play a point. There needs to be a reason why your geography is this way. Why do you have a cliff? Because it is the the representation and this in your socioeconomic status. It keeps you from upward mobility, and that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. And why do we have a river? Well, one, because we'd be in a desert if we didn't have it, but also it helps separate the town into districts, and it makes the crossroads representation come into play. And there's also going to be some difficulties, some obstacles that they're going to have to overcome in going from one district to the other, because it's not just a matter of, oh, I can just walk right over. It's like, no, I have to go to a specific bridge and cross over, or find a way to cross over the river itself, or find one of the ways, not going to spoil that just yet, one of the ways you get up the cliff wall, unless you can fly, or you want to climb the cliff. Good luck with that. That's going to be super great. I mean, unless you got some great items to help you out with that. Hashtag those spiders of spidery climb. That would help a ton. But not everybody's got access to that, and only one person can wear them. So anyway, let's keep going on. So we've kind of mapped out the town. Geography wise, we haven't even touched the buildings or anything like that. We'll get to that later. That's another day. But what about outside of the town? So thinking Western fields. One thing that I want is you're near the river. There is going to be some plant life and things like that, because they're near the river. It's a little more fertile right there. But what you're not going to have is like a thriving, metropolis of plant life kind of thing, because you're still you're in a very deserty, gritty kind of place. So there's going to be some of that, but definitely not a jungle. And so one of those things is there aren't any trees. No trees. They're too big. They take up too much water. If there were a bunch of trees here, the river vivarium would dry up, and there wouldn't be no town. So we don't want any trees. They take too much, and that also makes it hot, because there ain't no trees. There ain't no shade. No trees, but we can have cacti. We can have grasses. We can have spiny plants. Things like that. And this could be fun too, because maybe I decide to make a monster that looks like a cactus. Maybe yes, maybe no. Or maybe we got a monster that likes to throw people into cactus. That would be fun. That's a really fun idea. Suddenly a bugbear comes out of nowhere, grapples your character, and then tries to throw you in the cacti. Roll for acrobatics for a save. Roll a dex saving throw. Actually, I kind of like that a lot. Or maybe like I said, a plant that looks like a cacti, and whoa, it's not. All of a sudden, it does stuff. So thinking cacti, grasses, some spiny plants. One aesthetic that I like too is like Joshua Tree. Have you ever been to Joshua Tree? You know what I'm talking about. Joshua Tree. National Park.